Welcome to the App Fairy podcast, where I, Carissa Christner, the App Fairy, introduce you to some of my very favorite app developers. This is our first episode, and so I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I decided to create this podcast. I'm a children's librarian, and a few years ago, I started using apps in my story time and at my library in general. But when I was trying to find good apps to use at my library, it was a real challenge. There are a lot of apps in the App Store, and the App Store itself can be kind of hard to navigate and really hard to find stuff that you really love. So I started looking and I started testing out apps and I started trying them out. And over the years, I have discovered that I have a few favorite app developers. It's sort of like when you go into a library or a bookstore and there's tons and tons of books there on the shelves. If I didn't know any authors, then going and looking at all those shelves would feel extremely, extremely overwhelming. So when I go into the App Store, if I don't know any app developers, it's the same thing. But now that I have some favorite authors that I like, whenever I know that a new book is going to be coming out by them, I get super excited that it's going to come out. And I get that same giddy sense of anticipation whenever I learn that my favorite app developers are going to be putting out a new app. And so I wanted to introduce you to some of my favorites so that perhaps you also can feel that same sense of happiness when you learn that they are putting out a new app or when you discover something new by them. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Anne Glick, creator of One Globe Kids, an app that lets users virtually meet new friends from around the world. The story of Valdo from Haiti comes free with the app, and you can follow him in pictures through a typical day for him and hear him talk about his life.
My name is Valdo. Our home is in the mountains. Come, I'll show you around.
Through an in-app purchase, you can also meet a girl named Gabu, who is from Haiti, and hear about her day.
Hello, my name is Gabu.
There are also children from the Netherlands, Indonesia, Burundi, and New York City. Anne does a great job of including a thoughtful mix of both boys and girls, children from different races, and from different socioeconomic backgrounds. I had discovered One Globe Kids a few years ago when I was first exploring the App Store, and I thought it was a great app. Well, then I was having a conversation with one of my friends here in Madison who happens to be the mother of a college friend, and she told me that her daughter was going to be coming into town to work on her app. And I asked what app it was, and she said, One Globe Kids. And I said, no kidding, I love that app. So I'm really excited to be able to bring you today an interview not only with the creator of One Globe Kids, but also an interview with a woman who has been a friend of mine for many years. So I'm really glad you're able to talk with us today, Anne. Tell us a little bit more about your app, One Globe Kids.
So One Globe Kids is basically a collection of global friends. So it's designed for children from 4 to 10 years. Works a little bit younger also. And basically through it, children can have the experience of meeting and spending time with and being a friend with somebody from someplace they've never been. Maybe who speaks a different language, who's a different religion, who comes from a different culture. But it's designed to be visually and audially rich enough that it's like a friendship experience.
And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just kind of backing up and telling everybody the story about why you created One Globe Kids.
Definitely. Well, I was reading to my 3-year-old. I think it was a convergence of like a number of things that happened. I was reading to my 3-year-old and was fascinated with these books that just had photos in them. Mm-hmm. You know, like 1,001 words, and it was just pictures, images. And
right.
First I was like, oh my gosh, these are so boring. But he just loved it. And then I found a book that an aunt gave to me, years ago. I think when I was born, but I didn't discover it until I was probably 5. Mm-hmm. And it's this book called Joyce's Day, and it was published in South Africa, and it's really simple, but it's photos of a little girl called Joyce. And she goes shopping with her mom, and she has breakfast with her brother, and they play outside. And I read that to Sebastian, and it just brought back all these memories of how much I loved that book and was fascinated when I was little with this book, because she would play doll and she would carry her doll on her back and it's with like wrapped up with a towel. And her mom carried the groceries home on her head. And I found it fascinating because it was like the same as me, but a little different. And Sebastian reacted the same way, not so much to Joy's, but to her brother Babu, who built a car out of, like wire and made his own drums and stuff like that. And around that same time, some friends of mine in New York, when we were like mom friends and we all had young kids, and they would say, oh, it's cool that your kids get to travel, because we come to the Netherlands sometimes to visit my husband's family, and we're raising the kids to also speak Dutch, and they'd say, I wish that I could do that kind of thing for my kids. So there was this kind of like idea that there was more than life where we were living in New York City.
Yeah.
But they didn't know how to introduce it to their kids, but they wanted to.
Yeah, it's kind of a big concept.
Yeah. And so I started thinking, well, this is what I really love. I really love living abroad and trying to explain and what goes on in my life overseas and how it's so similar to what's happening back home when I come to Wisconsin. And so I thought maybe I'm going to try and do that. So I went to Haiti for another development-related work job, and I stayed and met Valdo and Gabu.
The first two kids featured in your app.
I had arranged it all ahead of time. But originally, I thought I was making a book series, like the Joyce's Day book. But when I came back a few months later, the earthquake hit in Port-au-Prince, and I just had all these images in my mind of what had happened there, and how when I was there, I did all these fun things with these kids, and after, making sure that everybody was safe, I thought, I don't want the story to only be about how everybody in Haiti is wounded and poor, because they're also just like us.
Right.
And that's the message I want my kids to have. And about the same time, the iPhone hit the market in New York. And I saw people, I talked to a mom at a playground, and they were trying to get home, and she'd hand her phone to her child, and I was a little bit surprised by it, but I would see it more and more, and I thought, actually, this could be a good way to make something that's really engaging and could be shared really widely.
So you went to Haiti, and you stayed with the families?
I try not to stay with the families that I'm working with. I stay in the area. So I stayed in their village in a guest house, and that was a fun experience because I had, so Sebastian was 3.5, and I also had an 8-month-old, and I was still nursing him. And so before I left, so I knew I was going, right? So I had like 2 months prep time to pump every night before I went and put it in the freezer. And then, but that meant while I was there, I also had to pump like 5 times a day. I just remember thinking, I must be insane because so in the story of Valdo, it takes him like 2 hours to get to the school, right? So he has to get up and leave the house before 6, which meant I had to get up and get ready. But before that, I had to pump. I got up at like 4:30 that morning, and his house was, I don't think, probably not more than 70 yards from where I was staying.
Right.
But I had to pump both sides, and with the light of like the kerosene lamp.
Oh no!
But it was great.
That must have felt very surreal.
It was great because it's like those are like the little things that make every life similar everywhere. Like
that's true.
His mom probably nursed him.
Right. So you went to Haiti and you did the photography when you thought it was going to be a book. How did the project grow then to include the kids that it does?
I guess when I started, I had no idea what a journey it would be. And so I made the first apps, and even just making the Valdo and Gabu stories into apps was an adventure because I was living in New York City, and I really enjoy languages. And one thing I liked about the technology and using apps instead of books was it was really easy to create an experience where the child felt like they were meeting the kids. But I didn't want just English-speaking children to be able to meet Waldo. So I looked for children who could read the stories in English and French and Dutch, which meant I was meeting all these kids in New York.
Very international kids, yes.
Yeah, it was, that was a cool experience. And from there, I realized I want it to be not just us learning about them. It has to be a global thing, not about the North or the South or the East or the West or the haves or the has-nots, but it should be about everyone because that's the point. We all have so much in common.
Right.
So I started thinking about which stories I could do next, and I found contacts in New York who I felt were representative of the area. So I tried to look for children who are from both locations, a boy and a girl, and in some way represent the diversity of the location. And New York, I guess, because it's so large, is the only city so far I've done, but I call it New York City instead of a country.
Oh, okay.
So in the Netherlands, I found children who lived in different areas of the country. And then I added Indonesia because I wanted to have someone from another region. And I don't want to find kids or feature children who, it's not an audition. These are supposed to be normal kids. And that's what I think the beauty of it is because every normal kid is interesting. It does cool stuff.
You yourself traveled, though, to all these different locations, and you did all the photography and interviews yourself. I think that's totally fascinating. How long would you be in a location with a family?
So for each story, I plan on at least a minimum of 2 days that I'm actually taking photos with each family, but it can be up to 4.
Okay.
And then also a day before that where, I've made all the contacts and connections prior to going, but then I go and meet the family. And I don't take any pictures, and it's just time to talk and make sure that they're comfortable and for me to meet the child and the child to decide themselves if they want to participate. I always bring my camera. I let the kid play with the camera. Because I want, it's some ways it's like a cross-cultural immersion experience,
right?
Because I'm going to be with them for several days, so we have to get along. And also, I try to minimize as much as possible how my presence influences the images that I take and what their day is like.
So that it really is a typical day in the life of.
Right.
Yeah.
I try to blend in as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like how you say that you make sure that the kid has buy-in too, because that's really important. I mean, we have all these grown-ups making decisions for them, but they're the ones who are the focus of it. And so I really like that you are respecting the kids and letting them make the final decision about, I want to participate, or no thanks.
Yeah, it's their story.
Right. Were most of the kids really excited?
They're a little bit nervous the first time I come because they don't really know what that means. And, the Haiti stories, those kids really took a leap of faith because I didn't have anything else to show them.
Right.
And then when I met the other children, I could show them what it would be like.
Yeah, so they could see an example.
They could see it, and then, we would talk a little bit about things that they like to do, and, I find basically everything fun and interesting. So I can really show my enthusiasm that way, and kids are generally really enthusiastic, too.
Yeah, I like watching you interact with kids. You've got a nice way with kids, which I think comes across in the app. I mean, I think it's kind of important for the kids to feel like they're talking to another kid, which is kind of the point of the app, right? And
it's absolutely the point of the app. And I try to frame all of the images so that as much as possible, it's the perspective of the child that you're seeing or how they're experiencing something. And the other thing I pay attention to when I'm taking pictures is what's in the background and how the picture is framed. So every location is a little bit different. In Haiti, they're very wary of foreigners, taking pictures of what they feel like is their poverty or showing that side of it.
Right, that
and
makes sense.
That's not my intention at all.
Right.
The story is about Valdo or Gabu's life, and so I'm very intentional about how I frame the picture so that it's clear not only to just the child but to anybody in the vicinity that this is a personal story.
So, Anne, one of the reasons that you developed this app is that you really wanted to encourage kids to embrace empathy when they think about kids from around the world. Can you tell us more about why that's so important to you?
There is a lot of research that is starting to come out now that is talking about this, that's talking about the power of the image in reducing bias and increasing cultural openness, and along with that, the power of our imaginations. There's a new field called imagined contact, and that's it's part of this field of intergroup contact, which is about how people from different groups get along. So, and they know from research that it's basically between the years of 7 and 10 that implicit bias starts to settle in. So the research that's come out on imagined contact with kids can be potentially immensely powerful for generations, I feel. Basically, imagined contact is when you, instead of actually interacting with somebody, you can imagine yourself interacting with them, and they've been able to measure the benefits of doing that.
Wow.
It's improved attitudes to people in those other groups, better perception of similarities with other groups, increased willingness for contact. So basically, they did studies with kids, and they wanted to see if they could, through they did it in Italy and the UK, and having school children there imagine interacting with an immigrant child.
Okay.
And, simply imagining playing with somebody significantly increased their willingness to interact with them. And they tested that by you see an immigrant child at a playground. How likely are you to ask them to play, to ask them if they want to come over to your house, to ask them if they want to have dinner with your family?
Interesting. So if they imagined kind of getting over that first hurdle of shyness of not wanting to approach someone that seems unfamiliar, if they just imagined that helped them to actually then be more open to actually experiencing that. Yeah,
and one of the reasons they think this works is because it helps to create a mental script for yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is actually something else I'm excited about. So we've reached out to a number of researchers in this area, and actually, Globe Smart Kids, so the organization that's making these apps, is going to be partnering with the University of Kent in a whole new field of study on using virtual contact through the app to create global citizens and tackle prejudice. And they call it simulated contact. So it's basically, beyond imagined contact, what our app is trying to do is to give kids the feeling that they've already made a friend. They already are friends with Janisa in Burundi or Aji in Indonesia. Right. So when they have the chance to be friends with somebody from somewhere else in their own environment, because they've already done it, it's easy. It removes a lot of the anxiety and other hurdles. It basically smooths the way to friendship with people from other groups that you maybe wouldn't naturally choose to be friends with because you don't perceive the similarities as easily.
Wow. So your app could have some really far-reaching potential.
The theories behind it are really strong.
Yeah. That's awesome. Are you...
Plus, it's supposed to just be fun.
And it is fun. It also is fun. Are you planning to create any more recording or any more friends? Like, are there any other kids that you're thinking about?
Oh, yeah.
Telling their story? What places are you planning to take us next?
Well, we actually have a number of places in production that I'm really excited about.
Ooh.
Yes. So we have stories from Israel and Palestine.
Nice.
And Norway.
Okay.
And another story from Indonesia.
Uh-huh.
And next places we're looking at are South America and China.
And I also realized, and I don't think I told anybody yet, where are you living right now?
I'm living in the Netherlands.
Right. So this is a phone call that is across the oceans, and I'm really excited that we were able to connect with you.
Me too.
Yes.
I love the app, so I'm happy to talk about it always.
I want to give a big thanks to Anne Glick for talking with us on this episode. This interview was originally recorded in April 2016. It's taken us a little while to get this podcast series up and running, so I asked Anne if she had any new updates to add, and here's what she wrote back. We released the story of Larasati in Indonesia in December, and it's our first Muslim story. It's free in the app and on the website. I love it because Larasati is very fun. She plays outside a lot, goes to the arcade, goes to school by herself, and because she's observant, she prays 5 times a day and goes to the mosque. Anne also told me that the study by the University of Kent in Canterbury is now underway. It's called the Global Citizenship Research Study and includes more than 200 primary school students. Results are expected in March. It explores the actual impact of simulated direct contact on young children. In essence, what does One Globe Kids really do in terms of children's attitudes and behaviors towards those in other groups? Anne also has a request for all of you listeners. She writes, "We're working with volunteers to put all the stories into Spanish and looking for funding to add stories from South America. So if anyone wants to translate or has children who would be interested in narrating a story, please email Anne at info@oneglobekids.com. Be sure to check out www.appfairy.org. There, you can see pictures of Anne, download some free activity sheets, and watch a short video of the App Fairy visiting Anne in the Netherlands. The App Fairy podcast is a production of the Madison Public Library and is sponsored by the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, a nonprofit research and innovation lab dedicated to advancing children's learning in a digital age. Visit cooneycenter.org for more information about the work they do. A big thanks to Audrey Martinovich, our audio engineer, and to David Seste, who created our theme music. My name is Carissa Christner. Thanks for listening.